It's always important, in my view, to mark specific historic events. And I think particularly those that relate to black and ethnic minority communities in a historical context, it's really important to get that revelation in some cases out there. Sir Leary Constantine was one of the greats of that history and certainly a pioneer in terms of the things that he did. His achievements are great and various. He wrote, he spoke, he took legal action against a hotel that barred him from staying there once they'd accepted his reservation over the phone. So these are landmark things that he did. He became a member of the Board of Governors of the BBC, and then of course he became a member of the House of Lords, sat on the crossbenches, I'm pleased to say, which is where I sit. And so I think that then puts his achievements in context. It was another 25 years before another black person came into the House of Lords, so that's some distance, and it shows you how difficult it must have been for him at that particular moment. I think I've had quite an unusual trajectory career-wise because I've done all kinds of different things. The reason I came into the House of Lords was really, I think, because I'd done so much public service, particularly around the fight for equalities and anti-discrimination, anti-racism in the arts and the cultural field. That was my main sector that I'd worked in, but I had worked also in social work and other areas too. So all that knowledge and experience that I'd accumulated over the years as a practitioner, as a theorist, as an academic, as a policy maker, all kinds of different roles in, as I say, arts, culture, but also in the criminal justice system. All of those different elements came together and brought me into the House of Lords. I think for me, one of the most interesting aspects is that you can make it what you want to make it. So for me, it's been very important to be able to say, well, look, I'm here in this very privileged position. And what I can do is bring to the attention of ministers, policymakers, people in power, people with influence, some of the issues that concern a huge number of people outside of these kind of hallowed corridors. So for example, I have some experience of what it's like to be in the care system. What happens to care leavers when children have been in care and leave as adults? What happens to them after that? The things that concern me. And I'm particularly interested in that because so many children who leave care end up in the criminal justice system. So I think initially when I came into the House of Lords, although of course arts and culture is my background, I started to get involved in legislation around children in care and care leavers. Then I got swept up in putting down an amendment around modern slavery. Now this is before we called it modern slavery, so it was really about forced labour and domestic servitude. In 2009 that was. And then I got really engaged in that set of arguments and struggles and looking at all of those issues. And at that time, there was very little going on in terms of understanding and awareness of what all of that was about. So it wasn't until 2015 when we had the Modern Slavery Act that the legislation really took off. So I got involved in all of that. That kind of came around a little bit in full circle because my creative and cultural industries background meant that I was really interested in fashion. But of course, fashion is one of the high-risk industries in relation to modern slavery. So that's how I got very deeply involved in the legislative aspects of modern slavery, as well as the policy side, and as well as the kind of relationships, building relationships with fashion businesses in order to help them change their practices. I'd like to think that anybody who's got the will, the determination, the application, the resilience, the ideas, the creativity and the intelligence to do so would want to get involved in politics. And I think from my point of view, I was never a party political person. So I think it's really important to keep open a non-party political space for people to be engaged in politics at the highest level. It's very interesting to me to see how Black History Month has developed over the years, because when I first started getting engaged in these kinds of debates, it was in the 1980s and it was a new thing. And of course, we kind of imported that from the United States of America. As I say, interesting to see it evolve over the years, and I would like to see it evolve even further, develop even further. and to become something that was much more historically based, because I think we've been through a phase where a lot of it has been about the kind of multicultural celebrations, and I think we need to take a really rigorous, robust look at the history, the intertwined histories of all the different communities that are in this country that have been here for centuries, for millennia. You know, how do we incorporate all of those stories in a non-tokenistic way into the mainstream of British history, and what buildings, what institutions might represent that history? I think that is a really big challenge that we ought to be addressing.